I couldn't believe it was finally mine. My father's house, the place where I spent my childhood. It wasn't much by modern standards, but to me, it was everything. The smooth, level driveway I'd poured myself was a perfect stretch of concrete that mirrored everything I wanted to be: solid, reliable, lasting. My dad always said it was a good foundation for a good life. It felt like a fitting tribute when he passed, something I never thought I'd have to defend. Walking up the driveway, I felt that familiar sense of pride. It was more than just land or property to me. It was a symbol of my family's legacy, my father's blood, sweat, and tears. He'd worked hard to provide a stable life for us, and this house, this driveway, was his final gift to me. No one would take this from me. That afternoon, I got home after a long day at work, exhausted, but the sight of my driveway always grounded me. But today was different. I pulled up to see a white BMW parked diagonally across the front of my driveway. Not just a little bit off, but fully blocking both spaces. The shock hit me first: was someone just careless? Then, I saw it, a pink note tucked under the windshield wiper. I got out of my truck, my mind racing. What the hell? I snatched the note, and in bright, cutesy handwriting, it read, "Be neighborly." I couldn't suppress a groan. Seriously? Neighborly? I glanced around, but no one was in sight. I shook my head and backed my truck around the BMW as best as I could, barely squeezing by. I could feel my heart racing with frustration, my fingers gripping the steering wheel tighter than I liked. When I got home from work the next day, the same damn BMW was back, parked in the same spot. No note this time. I barely kept my calm. I had a sinking feeling that this wasn't just an accident anymore. This was deliberate. So, I did what anyone would do: I went next door to find out what the hell was going on. When Loretta opened the door, I was surprised by how friendly she looked. Perfectly done hair, a silk bathrobe, oversized sunglasses, like she was auditioning for some reality TV show about rich housewives. "Oh, hey there. You must be Travis, the new neighbor," she said in a voice too sweet to be genuine. "Yeah, that's me," I said, forcing a smile. "Listen, your BMW is blocking my driveway. I've had to squeeze past it twice now. I was hoping we could work something out." She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be such a stickler. I had no choice. My husband's car is in the shop, and I don't have anywhere else to park. Just for a few more days, I promise." I wasn't sure if it was her tone or the way she was looking at me like I was being unreasonable, but something in me snapped. "That's not the point," I said, my voice shaking with the frustration I was trying to hide. "You're blocking my driveway. It's my property, and it's not up for grabs. If this happens again, we're going to have a bigger problem." She gave me that smile, the one that said she knew exactly how to manipulate people. "I'll try to do better, sweetie. But come on, we're neighbors. We should share, right?" I left her porch that day feeling like I'd just spoken to a brick wall, but I told myself I was being reasonable. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. And it hit me then: this wasn't about parking. This was about something much bigger. Something I wasn't prepared for. I just didn't know how much worse it could get. I didn't expect the confrontation to go like it did. The next morning, after my first talk with Loretta, I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she just didn't realize the inconvenience she was causing. But as I pulled up to my driveway again that evening, my stomach dropped. There it was. The BMW. Right back where it had been the day before, diagonally across the front of my driveway. This time, no note. No attempt at an excuse. Just the car, sitting there like it belonged. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I threw the truck in park, slammed the door, and marched up to her house. I was beyond frustrated. I felt that familiar heat rising in my chest, the one I always get when someone crosses a line. When Loretta opened the door, she had that fake sweetness plastered all over her face. The kind of smile that made your skin crawl, like she was trying to sell you something you didn't need. "Travis. So nice to see you again," she chirped, not even bothering to look at the car blocking my driveway. "I was just—" "Loretta," I interrupted, my voice tight, "this is getting out of hand. Your car is blocking my driveway again. I've asked you before not to do this." Her smile didn't falter. In fact, it grew wider. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said, her voice dripping with sugary sweetness. "You know how it is with all these cars. My husband's Porsche is in the shop, and I just don't have anywhere to put them." I fought to keep my voice steady. "It's not about where your cars are. It's about my property. You're taking up space that belongs to me. And I've already told you that this can't happen again." Loretta crossed her arms, still grinning, as if she wasn't hearing a word I said. "Well, we're neighbors, right? We should share. I'm sure we can work something out. No need to get all upset over something so minor." Something about the way she said that, like it was all just a small favor she was doing me by only using half of my driveway, set me off. I took a deep breath and pressed on. "No, Loretta. This is more than just sharing. This is you disregarding my boundaries." My voice started to shake, not with fear, but with the frustration I couldn't hold back any longer. "I need you to move your car and stop parking here. You're not the only one who lives in this neighborhood." She tilted her head and let out a little sigh, like I was the unreasonable one. "Travis, sweetie, don't be so uptight. I'm sure if you'd just let me use the driveway, you wouldn't have to worry about it." "Let you?" I felt my jaw clench. "This is my property. You don't get to let me do anything." She took a step closer to me, her smile never wavering. "Well, I'm afraid I have more influence around here than you think. I'm on the HOA board, and I'd hate for you to get any fines for noncompliance. The community rules are strict, you know." My stomach dropped. "Hoa?" I had no idea what she meant, but I felt a knot form in my gut. She wasn't just a neighbor, I was dealing with someone who could use her position to make my life difficult. I looked at her, finally seeing the full picture. "Are you threatening me?" She shrugged, that same smile glued to her face. "I wouldn't call it a threat. Just, you know, a friendly reminder. I wouldn't want you to have to deal with any consequences, Travis. It's such a lovely neighborhood, and I'm sure we can both make it work." I stood there, my head spinning. I wasn't just fighting a neighbor, I was fighting a system, a machine built on power I hadn't even realized she wielded. I could feel the walls closing in on me, but I refused to back down. "You can't just take what's mine," I said, my voice low, determined. "I'm not going anywhere." Loretta gave me one last sweet smile. "We'll see about that." I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. After my conversation with Loretta, I started thinking about what she'd said, about being on the HOA board. I never thought I'd care about something like an HOA, but now, it felt like a hammer hanging over my head. I needed to know more. So, I spent the next few days looking into the HOA. It didn't take long to find the records. Loretta's name popped up everywhere, approving this, denying that. She was everywhere. The more I dug, the more I felt the knot tighten in my stomach. Loretta wasn't just some power-hungry neighbor. She had connections, and she wasn't afraid to use them. There were files about the fines she'd imposed on neighbors for the most trivial things: improper lawn care, too many garden gnomes, wind chimes being too noisy. And then there were the land deals. I found an old survey of my property, the one that my family had paid for years ago, showing the boundaries clearly marked. But the new documents, the ones Loretta had been using to justify her expansion into my space, didn't match. There were discrepancies. The boundaries were fudged, manipulated. My land, my driveway, wasn't where I thought it was. It was being siphoned off piece by piece. My heart started pounding as I read through the documents. She had been buying up adjacent lots, making shady deals, pushing through approvals under the radar. All of it was connected. She'd been quietly moving in on my property, piece by piece, and I'd been too blind to see it. I knew then that this wasn't about parking anymore. Loretta was stealing my family's legacy, and I had no idea how deep her corruption ran. The more I uncovered, the more I realized I was in way over my head. And yet, there was a part of me that wanted to believe I could work this out peacefully, that I could reason with her, that she wasn't as bad as I was making her out to be. But then I'd see the documents again, the falsified signatures, the unauthorized permissions. The anger bubbled up inside me, choking out any hope of a peaceful resolution. I was interrupted by a knock on my door. It was Marlene, my 70-year-old neighbor, standing there with a folder in her hands. "Figured you'd be needing this," she said, her voice steady. I opened the folder, and there were photos, lots of them, of Loretta's cars parked illegally, blocking driveways, violating every rule she'd imposed on the neighborhood. There were also old letters, complaints from other residents, and notes from the HOA meetings, all pointing to the same thing: Loretta had been making life miserable for anyone who dared challenge her. "I've been waiting for you to figure it out," Marlene said, her eyes hard. "Loretta's been a problem for years. She pushes people around, uses her position to get what she wants. But you're different." I couldn't help but feel a rush of emotion, relief mixed with anger. Relief that I wasn't crazy, that someone else had seen through her. But also anger, because this had been going on for so long, and I hadn't known. "She's stealing my land," I muttered, more to myself than to Marlene. "She's using the HOA to do it. I'm not just dealing with a neighbor anymore. I'm dealing with a system." Marlene nodded. "Exactly. And that's why you need to fight back. Don't let her win. You have rights, and she's not above the law. Take her on, Travis. Take her down." It was like a light bulb went off in my head. Marlene was right. I had been trying to be reasonable, trying to solve this quietly, but Loretta wasn't playing fair. It was time to fight back, for real. I couldn't sit on this any longer. I had to know the full extent of what Loretta was doing. So, I called Marlene and asked if she could help me dig deeper. She didn't hesitate. She'd been living in this neighborhood long enough to know where all the skeletons were buried. We started at the local records office. The place smelled like old paper and dust, but the documents were crystal clear. I didn't know much about legal papers, but I had a feeling about the discrepancies I was about to uncover. Marlene pointed me to a stack of old surveys, some dating back decades. I grabbed the first one for my property and compared it to the latest one Loretta had been using. It hit me like a punch in the gut. The boundaries didn't match. The survey she'd provided for the HOA showed that a significant portion of my driveway, my pride and joy, was technically considered common space. "What the hell is this?" I muttered, trying to keep my voice low. "She's been manipulating the records. This is all wrong." Marlene squinted at the document, then nodded. "She's good at what she does, Travis. And she's been doing it for years. But this is beyond just parking issues." I skimmed through more documents. Loretta had been pushing for approval on construction projects for months, additions to her property, expansions that directly impacted mine. I found approvals signed off by her that shouldn't have been. I could feel the blood draining from my face. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. This was fraud. Loretta had been using her position on the HOA board to rubber stamp these illegal expansions. She'd been doing it to me and others. My land wasn't the only one she'd encroached on. I felt like I was losing ground beneath me. I thought I was just defending my driveway, but this was bigger than I realized. It was about history, my family's legacy. And now it was being stolen piece by piece, covered up with forged signatures and doctored documents. Marlene handed me a stack of papers with a grim look. "This is just the beginning, Travis. You've got more than enough to go after her now." But, she hesitated, like she was weighing her words. "Are you sure you want to do this? It's going to get ugly. I've seen people like her chew up anyone who gets in their way. This fight will take everything from you." I took the papers from her hands, my fingers tight around the stack. I felt my stomach tighten, a wave of doubt creeping in. Was it worth it? Was this fight even winnable? The thought of months of legal battles, public scrutiny, and constant stress weighed heavily on me. But then I remembered my father, his pride in this land, his hope that I would keep it safe, keep it whole. This land wasn't just mine, it was a part of my family's legacy. I couldn't let someone like Loretta take that from me. I straightened up, feeling my resolve harden. "I'm in this," I said, more to myself than Marlene. "She's not going to get away with it." Marlene nodded. "Good. Then let's make sure she knows you're not backing down." I stood there in front of Loretta's house, my hands shaking, but my resolve stronger than ever. I had everything I needed: documents, proof, photos, even testimonies from the other neighbors who'd been crushed by her manipulative tactics. I wasn't going to let her take any more from me. Not my land, not my legacy. I rang her doorbell, trying to steady my breath. When she answered, her smile was still there, but I could see the flicker of recognition in her eyes. She knew something was up. "Travis," she said, almost too sweetly. "What's going on? You look like you're carrying the weight of the world." "You're right," I said, not bothering to play nice anymore. "I've been doing some digging, Loretta. I've seen what you've been doing. All those documents, the fake surveys, the forged signatures, this isn't just about parking anymore. It's about you stealing from me and from this whole neighborhood." I could see her eyes narrow, her smile faltering for just a second. She wasn't used to being challenged like this, not after all the control she'd had for so long. "Travis, now I don't know what kind of wild ideas you've got in that head of yours, but," she started, her tone shifting from sweet to something sharper, colder. "No, you don't get to spin this anymore," I cut her off. "I've got the proof, Loretta. The community records, the documents you tampered with, this is fraud. You've been using your position to push through approvals for your own gain, and it stops now." I stepped forward, holding the papers up, showing her the clear evidence of her manipulations. "I'm not backing down, and I'm taking this to court." She didn't flinch. In fact, she laughed, bitterly. "You think you can take me down with some papers? You think this is just about land?" Her voice dropped low, and I could hear the threat behind her words. "I'm not just some neighbor you can push around, Travis. You're making a huge mistake." I felt my blood run cold, but I didn't move an inch. "I'm not the one who made the mistake. You did when you decided to mess with the wrong person." At that moment, her demeanor shifted entirely. The sweet mask she'd been wearing shattered, replaced with a look of cold fury. "I control this neighborhood, Travis. Not you. You think the HOA is the only thing I've got going? You think the developers, the local officials, none of them are in my pocket? You really want to take this fight public? You'll be crushed." I knew what she was trying to do. She was trying to intimidate me, break me, get me to back down. And for a second, doubt crept in. Her words hit harder than I expected, and I could feel the weight of the fight pulling at me. But then I remembered everything: my dad's legacy, the years of hard work, the pride I had in that land. This was never just about a driveway. This was about protecting something that was mine, something that mattered. "No," I said, my voice steady. "You don't control me. And you don't control this neighborhood. I'm not backing down. You've pushed too far. She scoffed. We'll see how long that resolve lasts when the fines start piling up. When your property is devalued and your life is turned upside down. Bring it on, I shot back, my anger rising. I'm not scared of you anymore. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was something else, something powerful growing inside me. I wasn't just fighting for my driveway. I was fighting for something bigger. And this time, Loretta wouldn't win. I'll be honest, the first few days after I filed the lawsuit felt like a whirlwind. There were meetings with my lawyer, phone calls with people I hadn't even considered getting involved, and endless hours spent trying to make sure I didn't screw this up. But one thing was clear, I wasn't backing down. Not now. The moment I handed the papers over to the court, I could feel the shift. Loretta's days of ruling unchecked were numbered. I watched the pressure start to build on her, piece by piece. Developers who had once worked with her now started to distance themselves, realizing that their shady deals weren't going to go unnoticed anymore. Loretta had always walked with that confident air, like no one could touch her. But suddenly, she wasn't so untouchable. Then, my neighbors started speaking up. I had no idea how much she'd really hurt them until they started reaching out to me. They shared their stories, how she'd fined them for things as small as grass growing an inch too tall or a child's bicycle being left out for more than an hour. They told me about the insane rules she'd enforced, all while ignoring her own violations. It was like they were waiting for someone to finally stand up to her. One evening, Marlene knocked on my door with a handful of signatures. "The whole block's behind you, Travis," she said, her eyes gleaming with something like hope for the first time in a long while. "We're all tired of her bullying. We want to see her gone." I hadn't realized how much Loretta's reign had affected the entire neighborhood. But now, with the support of my neighbors and the momentum of the legal battle, it felt like we were all standing together for something bigger than just me. It wasn't just my driveway anymore. It was our community's freedom from someone who thought they could control every aspect of our lives. Then came the phone call that I hadn't been expecting. It was from the HOA board. Marlene had her ear to the ground and tipped me off that they were holding an emergency meeting. I could practically hear the panic in their voices when they asked if I would be willing to settle this outside of court. I didn't even have to think about it. "I'm not settling," I said, my voice steady. "Not unless Loretta resigns and the developers pull out. Otherwise, we're going to court, and we're going public." The pressure on Loretta kept building. Neighbors sent in their complaints, photos, and testimony, making it clear that this wasn't just about me. This was about every resident she'd ever bullied, every time she'd pushed someone too far. She was exposed, and she knew it. The next morning, Loretta resigned from her position as HOA president. I could see it in her eyes the moment she walked past my house: defeat. The developers pulled out, citing reputational risks, and just like that, the fight was over. I had won. We had won. It wasn't just a victory for me. It was a victory for the whole neighborhood. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over us for so long began to dissipate, and people started smiling again. My driveway, my family's legacy, was safe, and so was the community I had come to love. Loretta never looked me in the eye again, and I think she knew why. She was the one who lost. She was the one who tried to take what wasn't hers. And I wasn't about to let that happen, not now, not ever. Standing in front of my driveway now, I can't help but feel a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. The dust had settled. Loretta was gone, the developers pulled out, and the neighborhood had started to heal. I'd won. Not just the legal battle, but something deeper, something that had changed me. I remember when I first started this fight, I was just trying to get my driveway back. That's all I wanted, peace. But somewhere along the way, it became about more than just concrete. It was about my family's legacy. It was about standing up for what was right, even when the odds felt impossible. And in the end, it wasn't just about me. It was about the community I'd almost lost. I've learned a lot through this. I'd always considered myself a reasonable person, someone who didn't like conflict. But when someone tries to take something that's yours, when they manipulate everything in their path, you realize that being reasonable isn't enough. You have to have the strength to stand up and keep standing, no matter how much it hurts. You can't just fold because it's easier. You have to dig deep, find that part of you that refuses to give up, even when you feel like you're drowning. Marlene told me once, sometimes, you have to fight with everything you've got, even when you think it's all gone. She was right. There were days when I wanted to walk away, when the pressure was too much, when the stress threatened to swallow me whole. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered my father, the man who worked tirelessly to make sure I'd have this land. I couldn't let someone like Loretta tear it down just because she thought she could. I couldn't let his work, his sacrifice, be erased. That was worth fighting for. Now, I feel a deep sense of accomplishment. Not just for winning, but for what I've learned about myself. I didn't realize I had the strength to face Loretta and the whole system she'd built around herself. But I did. I stood up, and I didn't back down. And in doing so, I've grown. I've become someone who understands that standing up for what's right takes more than knowledge, it takes resilience. Patience. And most of all, it takes the belief that no matter how long it takes, justice will eventually prevail. Looking around at the neighborhood now, I can feel a change. People are walking with their heads held higher. They smile more. They're free again. And that, more than anything, is what makes me proud. Not just my victory, but what it means for everyone here. It wasn't just about reclaiming my driveway. It was about reclaiming our voices, our power. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that justice is worth fighting for, no matter the cost. You don't just fight for yourself, you fight for the people who can't. You fight for what's right. And in the end, persistence always wins. I'm not just the guy who fought for his driveway anymore. I'm someone who's learned that standing up, no matter how hard, is always worth it. And I'll carry that lesson with me, every day, for the rest of my life.